Okay, this week I'm going to talk about reading. Something that I've really gotten back into over the last couple of years or so. I know back when I was drinking, I would very rarely, if ever, read because I was too concerned about getting drunk all the time. So I have rediscovered my passion for reading, whether it's through just for pleasure, like reading fantasy or sci-fi novels, or lately, what I've been doing is for reading a lot of nonfiction for knowledge and everything. Back in especially when I was in high school, I do like a lot of reading. Like I remember starting to read like the Lord of the Rings when I was 13 years old, and I would go through like the Fellowship of the Ring one summer that year. The next year, I went through the Two Towers, and the following year, I actually did the Return of the King. And I've reread that book at least a couple times over the years and everything. And of course, Peter Jackson came out with the live action trilogy back in the early 2000s, and like everyone then, I thought it was so cool, so that got me back into rereading them and everything. And I've also, like with Tolkien's work, I've also read The Hobbit, which they did the Hobbit trilogy after. And I've also gotten into the Silmarillion, and which is they're doing the Amazon TV show they're doing is like the Rings of Power. They're doing on like the earlier ages, which the Silmarillion goes into and everything. And I also got his books, two books of Lost Tales and everything. That I started reading the first one, but I haven't finished it and everything because I've gotten to the point where I've gotten like dozens of books that I want to read. And I'm currently reading one book on Nordic mythology and everything, which is nonfiction. And some of the books that I would read for fun would be Star Wars books. I got most of the books that were written starting in the early mid '90s with Timothy Zahn. He wrote what's called Thrawn trilogy. That was the first Star Wars series that came out after the original trilogy, and that was set 5 years after the Return of the Jedi movie. And they set up the books where the first one takes place right after Return of the Jedi, called the Truce of Bakura, and it goes all there's several series that go through the whole timeline from the end of Return of the Jedi to 25, 30 years after, with the Young Jedi Knight series, which gets into the kids of Han Solo and Leia, and it goes like I said, from beginning of Return of the Jedi, end of Return of the Jedi to 25, 30 years after that. Of course, now that's considered legend because of the sequels and everything. But those books, I loved reading and everything, especially the X-Wing series, because it got into the lesser known, the kind of more the minor characters in the movies, like Wedge Antilles, and some of the other sci-fi books that I read were BattleTech books. I mean, my brother's still big into that and everything. That's set in the 31st century, and you got these big 30 feet tall robots that people pilot and they use as war machines and everything. That's another series I got to. A lot of the fantasy books that I've gotten into were Forgotten Realms, and which one of the famous characters is Dristo Arden, who's a drow, and he go back when they were written, he goes up against the whole society, which is at the time they were written, the whole race was considered evil because they followed an evil spider goddess called Loth, and now they're starting to come out with more books on it, to kind of expand that realm and everything, a trilogy, a fantasy trilogy that I liked, that I got into, was by Elizabeth Kerner. First one was Song in the Silence. The next one was The Lesser Kindred, and the third one was called Redeeming the Lost. I probably read that first came around that probably about 15 years ago, and it's that whole sappy love story between a human who goes over to this island where supposedly dragons live, and she ends up falling in love with the dragon. And it's a whole story about those two, and how they're going up against an evil demon and everything. And I plan on rereading those, but like I said, I still got like dozens of other books that I'm currently in the process of either reading or have on the docket to read and everything. So recently I've shifted gears a lot from reading mainly I still read for fun, but not fantasy or sci-fi and everything. I'm more reading to kind of like broaden my knowledge and everything. So when it comes to recovery, reading could definitely be very helpful for that, because you can get into the science and psychology of addiction and everything. Now, some people may not be into reading. Like I had a coworker the last week or two kind of being a little snide about reading because oh, I don't fucking read in there. It's well, hey, it's your loss if you don't want to expand your knowledge and everything. And no loss on me, it's your loss. So I'm going to continue reading and everything. So I still actually get hard copy books because I'm kind of old fashioned. I like having the book. I like to be able to open the book and have it in my hand and be able to read and everything. There is also the Audible, which you can actually lets you listen to books and everything. So if you're going to commute from to and from work, if you're working 10-12 hour shifts or whatever, and you may not necessarily have the time to pick up a hard copy like me, you can always use Audible to listen to books and everything. So the biggest nonfiction topic that I've gotten into is since I'm big into Nordic mythology, I've been getting into that. I've read the Poetic Edda and the Prose Edda. Poetic Edda, I got the translation by Dr. Jackson Crawford. There's also a translation by Dr. Carolyn Larrington. So you can go either way. I also have read the Prose Edda by Snorri Sturluson, who was a 13th century author in Iceland. And of course, some people have issue with that because he's a Christian writing about Nordic mythology. But it's well, it's kind of skewed that way, but at least we have it and everything. And another thing that a book that I'd like to get into that I have is the Kalevala, which is the Finnish myth stories. There was a podcast called Northern Myths that I was listening to that they haven't released anything for a couple of years now, that I got into, and they were doing episodes on the Kalevala that I got a copy that I eventually plan on reading. So I'm currently reading a book called the Road to Hell by H.R. Ellis, who's an academic researcher who released the book, and it goes into the funeral rites and the afterlife of Nordic mythology and everything. So that's the one I'm currently reading right now, and eventually I like to get into other books and everything. So but like I said, with the Audible, it lets you listen to books and everything. So if you find a topic, say you like Chinese history or something, you could either buy books and read it the old-fashioned way like I do, or you could get Audible subscription and start listening to books to and from work, or you could do I work out at least I do lifting sessions at least 5-6 days a week. So you could be like me, and to save time, instead of listening to the music while you lift, you maybe listen to books or whatever. Do an Audible and everything. So I'm big on finding a topic that you are into and everything. So because when it comes to recovery, we have to find a lot of stuff to kind of fill our time. Because with me, it'd be a matter when I was drinking, okay, I'd stop spend the time stopping off at the store to get my beer or liquor or whatever. Then I'd spend the time drinking. Then of course I'd spend the time sleeping it off and and everything. So now not drinking, I have all that extra time to do all these other things and everything. So with reading, it helps you fill that time, and it also expands your knowledge and everything, and it helps you learn. So it could be any topic. I use the Chinese history. You could be into that, or you could be into Nordic mythology like me, or you could go down any rabbit hole of any topic. And the big thing is to try and find topics that interest you. So you may go a couple weeks either reading or listening to books on Chinese history, and you may find like, well, this isn't really for me. So, but then you start going down maybe the road of like African mythology, and like you find that something like that really interests you and everything. So like you may get to feeling like, oh well, I just wasted these 2 weeks going down this rabbit hole of Chinese history, but it's not going to necessarily be a total waste, because 2 or 3 months down the road, you may come across like a coworker or a friend or something. Hey, look, I'm starting to get into like Chinese history. You can now point them in the right direction. Be like, oh, hey, yeah, look, I wasn't really into this and everything, but like I read or listened to these books and everything. So this might be a good place for you to start. So like with reading, it's like anything. I try to make it like about building a habit of doing it and everything. So like it helps replace like your addictive behaviors. And even if you aren't someone who is like who was into addiction or anything, it is a good idea to like to constantly be on top of stuff and everything. So like whether like you're in a job that you like, maybe you might be a geologist, like for a career, and like you get into reading about that or whatever. It could be something that could help you expand your knowledge on your job as well. So like reading is perfect for like everyone, not just those of us who are recovering or have recovered from our addictive behaviors. And so like for me, like I make the habit of every morning when I get up before I go to work to read at least 4 or 5 pages of whatever book I'm reading. So that way, like I get at least some reading in, and it helps me wake up when I'm waking up, kind of get my brain turning first thing in the morning. And I like on top of like other stuff, like I do like a mobility flow like right after, so I can kind of get myself up and going. So like now, while I don't necessarily listen to books and everything, because I'm, like I said, more of like the hard copy type person. Like I like sitting down with like the hard copy in my hand. So like but an idea, like I said, for someone who may not be the type of person that is into hard copies, you do have things like Audible that you can listen to, or you can go off like places like YouTube that does have there. I did listen to like the Truce of Bakura Star Wars book that I mentioned. I did listen to that on like there's a YouTube channel that had one that I listened to. So like there's other options if you don't want to necessarily pay for an Audible subscription. You can go like to YouTube, or you can like maybe Spotify has some book channels or whatever, because I know like with Spotify I've gotten big into podcasts, so I might get into that eventually and everything. So like but like this week I was getting into reading and everything, which is like to kind of give people an idea of like well, let me find something that interests me so I can start reading and expanding my knowledge and everything. So like it's just, like I said, another way for people to like, especially like for someone like me, to fill my time instead of like thinking like, oh man, I gotta go out and get my booze or whatever, get drunk or whatever. And like, oh hey, look, I got such and such a book that I'm reading right now. So like and like it's pretty much like one of those things, like it's a matter of like us changing old negative behaviors to new positive ones and everything. So like reading is definitely like something that I find is definitely worth it and everything. So like it's just a matter of going down rabbit hole after rabbit hole to finding which topic kind of like interests you and everything. So like even if and like I said, even if you find like go down a rabbit hole that may not necessarily interest you, you at least have a basic knowledge that if someone comes to you, you can point them like, oh hey, here's something you can get started and everything, so you can pass knowledge on to someone else and everything. So this is why I find reading very important. So it helps you expand your knowledge, and you can also do it for fun, like I did with reading fantasy and sci-fi books and everything. So next week I might probably be getting into something as another one of the YouTube channels or something else that has helped me over the past several years and everything. So until next week.